Over the last 3 days, we've kicked things off with a Canadian federal CIO, a call from the White House, and a member of the House of Lords who helped galvanize the digital government movement around the world. It's only fitting that we now bring on Paul Glover, who shepherds the shared infrastructure on which an entire nation's digital government is being built. After a tumultuous 18 months, Paul Glover, who's the president of Shared Services Canada, is here to answer the question, where do we go from here? Morning, Paul. How are you? I jumped the gun on the morning, Paul. How are you a little bit? Hi, Paul. How are you?
Good morning, Alistair. Yeah, I started talking and then saw those cool arrows throw across. Really, really happy to be here. Great content. I won't tell you what my score is on the 450 trivia, but I was pleased to see you screwed the last question up too.
Cheers. Talk to us about where we're headed after the last amazing 18 months of change.
Well, absolutely happy to do that. But first, Alistair, to you and Rebecca, a huge congratulations. What an amazing event. And just a huge fan of what you guys are doing. When I was looking at the speaker lineup, I was humble. I'm like, what the heck am I doing amongst so many of these amazing speakers that you've lined up? Just fantastic content over a bunch of days and the way you move that forward over the whole year. So huge fan of what you're doing with this. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much on behalf of the community. We could have called this chat Captain Obvious, because I want to talk about two trends that are just so obvious, but I think they're worth unpacking a little bit today. So the first is everybody's been talking about hybrid work. What's going to happen looking forward, the future of work? Are we going back to the office? Are we never going to go back to the office? We'll be a little bit in between. And so hybrid work, we're hearing it over and over and over. My staff talk to me about it all the time. Where are we going? What are we doing? And I want to actually suggest that that's the wrong conversation. When I look at what's happened over the last 18 months, the real conversation, I think, is not about hybrid work. It is actually about the nature of our work and what we have learned as a society about the way we work. And for me, I will tell you, and that's the conversation that I'm pushing, when we think about nature of work, there's a couple of things that have jumped out at me that I think are going to stick with us moving forward. And they're really simple. So again, Captain Obvious, I said it, but I think that's what we're going to be here with this chat. So the first one is, regardless of where we work, our work is team-based. We have seen that over and over. People are working together. Work and the nature of our work is team-based. It is collaborative in its nature. And we have also seen that physical space is not the barrier we thought it was to working together. Our teams are distributed. They're able to work. They don't always need to come together. And so when we think about those as the nature of work, what does that mean for where we're going moving forward? I think one of the things that means is that technology will be an enabler for that kind of work. Technology will actually facilitate teams to collaborate, to overcome those space distances that we talked about. And so I think that as we move forward, we should stop talking about hybrid and start talking about the nature of our work, how we work, the way teams need to work, the way teams need to collaborate, and make sure that we're supporting that. And I will say, my personal belief and opinion is that much of the work we do in teams is not place dependent. But there are times and there are opportunities where place does matter. And I think we will see on creativity, on brainstorming, on a number of other things where we will see that teams do need and want to come together. And so I don't think that the future is going to be a few days a week in the office, a few days a week at home or wherever you choose to work from. I think it's going to be the nature of the teamwork that you're involved in, how you're using technology to interact and collaborate with partners, extend your reach, using the technology to facilitate those sorts of interactions. And then at different points in time where the team does need to come together for very specific reasons, physical space, I think, will be designed to support that kind of collaboration. Now, this may sound for a lot of people on this call like, well, yeah, duh. And in particular, the technology community has been doing this for years. But these tools have become a lot more mainstream, in my opinion. And we're seeing more and more Canadians using these tools in whatever industry they are in. And they become a lot more mainstream. And I think that's what's going to make this change in the nature of our work to be a lot more permanent as we move forward. I also think, and I'll come back to this later, the competition for talent is going to be fierce. So those that get this right, that really understand the nature of their work, how to organize themselves and use the technology, will find that it will be a competitive advantage for talent, for connectivity, for people to feel connected with the teams that they are part of and really contributing to them. And I think that is going to be an important differentiator as people struggle for finding the right team that they want to be part of in an environment where there's huge competition for talent. So that was just one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about this morning, Alistair and Rebecca, is that I think it's less about hybrid work and more about the nature of work and how we've seen team-based, collaborative, distributive, and where technology can really facilitate and make that kind of work easier, more efficient moving forward. I think that's something that I hope really sticks, and that will influence how we return to workplaces. So even when we're back in the office, we'll focus on the nature of work, that collaborative approach that we're doing. So that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. In about 15, 18 minutes, you can't talk about too many things. The other big thing that I wanted to talk about is this shift to digital that we have seen. We've seen it in all parts of society. It's a big part of this conference. And I think that is something that is far more sticky than people realize. It has just been fantastic in terms of that bridge for the isolation that people have faced. We found that we've been able to deliver services as governments. In the private sector, they found new and different ways to deliver services. If you look at just every sector of the economy marketplace, there has been a shift to digital and a reliance on digital and digital channels for delivery. So just, I think that is with us and it's there. Okay, so what does that mean for us moving forward? I think some of the lessons we've learned is the importance of moving at speed and at scale. In order to do digital well and to reach the sort of audiences that we want to reach, we've got to move fast. Speed and scale really, really matter in this space as it moves forward. And that's a behavior that we've got to bake in as we do this. I think the other thing we've seen, and if you've been following the news, cyber, ransomware attacks, cyber attacks, bad actors, it is part of the reality moving forward. And so cyber is no longer about building walls. It's got to be baked right in. It's got to be integrated in all the aspects of how we design and enable technology moving forward. Cyber is not an add-on later. It's not, okay, we built it, let's put a wall around it and keep it safe. Those things just don't work anymore, and it's got to be integrated right from beginning to end and woven into the fabric of the digital design as we move forward. Those that don't pay attention to cyber are really going to pay for it, and those that do will really be able to differentiate themselves moving forward. I think that is one of those trends as we move forward that is going to be very important. A lot of focus on cyber and cybersecurity. The other thing that I'm really excited about around this shift to digital that we've seen is something I hope we can spend a lot more time focusing on talking about, and that's the innovation that it has created. The new tools, the new pieces of software that we have seen, new ways of delivering services that we just didn't think were actually possible are now quite commonplace. And I think that that's driven a sense of innovation. And we've got to continue to capitalize on that. Health systems, health services, that wasn't the way things were being done. It's pretty commonplace now, and it will be. So there's just in so many different technologies and different parts of the economy, innovation that has occurred to drive this shift to digital. And I think it's really just beginning. We've just scratched the surface of what is possible in terms of digital delivery and channels for doing that well. Not everything worked well. I would absolutely admit that. If people are saying, yeah, well, Paul, here's some spots where it didn't work. Absolutely. I think that's to be expected. But this is an opportunity for more innovation. There's no need to stop. And I think we will continue to see that. we can expand our reach. We can make these platforms, even Alistair, what you guys were doing with the games and seeing those dots move around, we can change the experience. We can make it more immersive, more involving. And so that is, I think, something that is just going to continue. And that's important, I think, for us, because back to that comment about speed and scale, we've got to think in Canada about the Canadian ecosystem for IT. And I think that will be true of every nation. They are going to need a healthy IT ecosystem that is innovating, is developing new technologies, is developing intellectual property. If everything just goes to the large hyperscalers, and there's absolute role for them, they help with speed and scale, and they're really good at it. They're incredibly reliable, and we use them and rely on them deeply. But that's got to be paired with small, medium-sized enterprises that are innovating, taking those risks, developing new technologies, thinking about new ways to do and deliver those things, and pairing that up with that speed and scale to create a really healthy IT ecosystem that encourages not just operations, but innovation, intellectual property development moving forward is something that I'm really deeply interested in and want to make sure we spend a lot of time deliberately encouraging innovation and getting that onto those channels. So that speed and scale, absolutely, but also innovation, small, medium-sized enterprises. And those two things working together are going to be really, really important. A few other things as we start to wrap up my time together with you. I would say that trust is really important. We've seen, and I know you've had a number of speakers over the course of the last few days talk about this, but trust matters. And with that shift to digital, we've seen the power of digital and the power of technology for good and for bad to create huge platforms for misinformation. And we're going to have to come to terms with that. How do we build trust into these systems as we move forward? And there's opportunities if we think about things like digital identity and getting different levels of government to cooperate. That is going to be extremely important for us moving forward to regain that trust as it moves forward. I think that in addition, data and how we approach data, how we make data accessible, how we protect it when it needs to be protected, but make it open, accessible, and transparent for when it needs to be those things, will go a long way in making sure that we've built that fabric of trust for how these digital services are delivered and people will have confidence in them. If we don't, I think one of the things we will see is these alternate channels that will further create cleavage and stress this system. So we've got to take stock of the good and the bad and find a way to really minimize the bad, deal with the cyber issues, with the trust issues, with the misinformation as we move forward. It's going to be really important. I talked a little bit about the competition for talent. I think that's very real. It comes back to the nature of work, how we're going to move forward. I would say the other thing, though, that I believe we need to do as an IT community is to mature and become a little bit more professional in our approach to these issues. And I would draw parallels to things like the legal community, Past the Bar, the accounting community, GAP and standards, electricians, they have codes. I mean, if you think about it, doctors, we need to have a similar approach in the IT community. I still believe that there is too much individual work going on that is not aligned to standards, that we need to really support open source interoperability as these things move forward. But the days of, if the client wants it, we'll figure out how to do it, and if they're willing to pay for it, it's okay. That's not the way we approach things like accounting. It's not the way our physicians approach healthcare to us. We need to make sure that we are thinking in those terms as a professional community. What should our standards be? What should our codes of conduct be? How can we better make sure that we are identifying things that are, that's the way we all agree that's going to get done. And that will facilitate us as we move forward as a community. It will reinforce that notion of trust. It will mean we will be all collectively better able to move at speed, at scale. And I think it will help us with the talent crunch that is going to be facing all of us. We can't all be competing for the same scarce resources and not using them efficiently. And those scarce resources, in many instances, are not me, but you guys, and gals, the experts in the technology space. And so we've got to figure out how to deliver those things in a more efficient manner as we move forward. And I think, frankly, as with most industries, as they mature over time, the threat of regulations is becoming more and more real. And it comes back to that trust issue and what is the role of government in this space? How does it reinforce the good and minimize the potential for harm? Those conversations, I think, are real. They will matter, and there will be conversations about that. And we can't continue to avoid those as a community, as an industry, and we need to think about how would regulation be an enabler for us to advance what we want to do, rather than a drag, rather than a set of constraints and a burden. But I think as we mature into this, as we use digital channels more and more, regulation will be part of this. Final thing that I would say as I start to wrap up my time with you this morning, just given COP going on, and Alistair, I think you've talked a little bit about this. What does it mean to just hit a like button on a phone? Is what are the environmental impacts of the work that we do and all of this technology, and what is it that we can be doing as society deals with the reality of climate change, the use of technology, and how we make sure that we think about that from end to end moving forward. So really, really optimistic, really excited about what's happened over, not from the pandemic, that's obviously been tragic, but what we have learned from digital, how it has accelerated the shift to digital, and what it means for us moving forward. And I think if we accentuate the positive, embrace what hasn't gone so well, and really think about what we need to do moving forward, it's a really exciting time. And on that spirit of Forward 50, I think that a lot of positive can come from this if we learn those lessons, if we bake them into what we're doing. And so I'm really optimistic about what, from a digital point of view, the future looks like. With that, Alistair, I said it was going to be a whole lot of the obvious trends going on, but I think when you weave them together, sometimes it's good just to say them out loud.
I really like your point about standardization. Often there's this idea of like the lone creative hacker comes up with an amazing solution, you know, or all those lines about, well, this guy built in 5 days when it took 50 million consultants to build. The reality is that it's a balance between the standardization of things like microservices and then getting really creative on top of them. But I love the way you put that. You can't go to a doctor and say, doctor, I would like you to, you know, drastically change my head in a way that violates the Hippocratic Oath. And if you pay them enough, they'll change it. They have a set of professional standards and so on. And so if someone asks you to do something that would make a system vulnerable, you don't do it. And I think coming up with that is going to be really fascinating because we haven't got that. We have engineering degrees, we have other professions like that, but it does seem like coming up with standards that still let us innovate is going to be really hard. I saw one person on Twitter asking recently, excuse me, he said, I've known people in public service for decades, and I've been in public service for decades, and I see these tweets about technology flying by during Forward 50, and I don't understand them. Something's got to change. Now, my somewhat bullish response to that is yes, something's got to change. Public servants have to become more tech aware. The technology is not just this means of delivery. It's not like you don't need to know about the plumbing to use the bathroom. Increasingly, it seems to me like we need to level up everybody because the impact of cyber, the impact of how we deliver services, the impact of how we collect information and inform policy is so reliant on technology. Where do you see those two coming together? Like tech's got to get more standardized and more simple, and it's got to use consistent terms, but also policymakers and public servants need to get more technical in order to live in this new world.
Yeah, wow, you know what? This is such a rich topic. I should be mad at you for giving me so little time to cover so much ground, but thanks for the question. I think it is a really, really important question. And the simple answer is, particularly for governments, we've been too focused on policy, and we've got to be focused on operations and on outcomes. And I think we chatted a little bit about that in previous conversations. So, in fact, I've been briefing new ministers, cabinets were just sworn in, and one of the things that we've been talking with them about is embedding digital conversations in right when you're thinking about policy. Don't come up with the policy and say, now, how are we going to do this and what to do? It right from the outset. And I will tell you, I truly believe that those that do that well, that think about digital right from the outset, embed it in, they're going to find it's their competitive advantage. They will be able to move faster at speed, at scale. Look at what we've seen with this patchwork of different governments approving different vaccines at different times. We've seen different provinces with QR code. Why is that? And we've got to make sure that that's a competitive advantage. How come they got it before we did? What did they do that was different? Well, they didn't wait till the end. They built it in right at the beginning. And that is the big lesson. It's not just about policy. It's got to be implementable. It's got to be operationally focused. And the digital conversation can't happen at the end. And if you do it right at the beginning, it actually changes what the policy could be and its reach. And that's where it becomes a huge, huge competitive advantage. So I think that is part of this shift moving forward. Absolutely.
Awesome. That was a good answer considering I gave it to you at the tail end of your talk. Paul, as always, thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this without you, without everyone at Shared Services, and keep building that great infrastructure, and we'll keep running things on it. So thank you for all the work you do. It's a heartfelt thanks from all of us here at 450 and from the greater community. Really appreciate you showing up and sharing with us what you see in the months and years ahead.
Thank you so much. Keep up the great work.